In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Half a day, everyone, and welcome to another edition of In Full Zoom. I'm Nestor Licanto, and I'm pleased to welcome as our guest this week the CEO and Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority, Ms. Melanie Mendiola. Thanks for joining us, Mel.
Thank you. Half a day, Nestor. How are you?
Good, half a day. Thanks for joining us. And we're here to talk about the Guam Small Business Pandemic Assistance Grant Program. Can you just give us an overview of what exactly that is?
Sure. So as you can recall, in 2020, when we were in the beginnings of the pandemic, the Office of the Governor responded by doing what we called the Small Business Pandemic Assistance Grant 2020. And at GEDA, we're so creative. We don't give anything. They asked us what we were going to call the grant. We said we're calling it the Small Business Pandemic Assistance Grant. And so we were able to get some aid out there to the businesses over the summer. And we got good feedback, but we also learned a lot of great lessons from unveiling that grant program. Later on in the year, the governor continued to see, especially after the second lockdown, our governor continued to see the ongoing difficulty of our local businesses. And so she hadn't initially planned to do it, but she kind of piecemealed funding from other parts of the CARES Act, and she put together a rental assistance grant program for primarily for our brick and mortar businesses, bars, restaurants, retail. And following that, we were kind of short on that one. We didn't have. We had projected that we need about $5 million, but at the time only $3 million in funding was available. And so we continued to work together with the Office of the Governor to try to find the additional $2 million. But then at the same time, the governor continues to recognize that small businesses create, across America, small businesses create the largest number of local jobs. Here in Guam, our small businesses have to be especially resilient. Not only do they deal with an economy that's very fragile, right? We also deal with the changes in tourism, so global changes. We deal with weather, right? Typhoons and things like that, competition from abroad in the form of online businesses. And so the governor continues to see that small businesses need assistance. And so she asked us to put together another program to do two things. Number one is to meet the needs of those businesses that we didn't have enough funding for last year. So under the rental assistance grant, to figure out a way to close that gap, number one. And number two, to unroll another small business pandemic grant. And our goal was to unveil a small business grant that is more effective and more responsive and even better than the one that we did last year. And so because the governor would like to wait until the final guidance is passed, or wait until they review the final guidance. What we wanted to do was we wanted to give small businesses a chance to start to get all their paperwork together. We know, regardless of what the rules say, we know she wants to do something. That's the first thing. The second thing is we know that small businesses are going to have to put in paperwork. And generally the paperwork is an updated business license, updated GRTs, and so we wanted to give everyone a chance to start to get the paperwork together so that when we pull the trigger on the application, that businesses are ready to go. They can fill out the application, turn it in, and get processed as soon as possible and as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And how much money will be available for this?
So we did request from the Office of the Governor, we requested $30 million under the American Rescue Plan. It is so far, the signs are good that the governor does want to set aside $30 million to go out to small businesses. However, it is not clear yet whether the 30 million will be inclusive of the 2 million to make up for the businesses who didn't get the rent relief last year, or if that'll be separate. We're also working on a program for farmers, and farmers don't do BPTs, they don't do GRTs, and but there aren't quite as many farmers, so we don't anticipate that being a large portion of the 30 million, although there would be a portion of the 30 million. Just to give you refresh your memory, last year we distributed about 18 million in the form of a small business pandemic grant to over 2,200 businesses. And so this is a more generous program, especially for our smaller businesses. So if you're a larger small business, so the cap on the last round was $50,000. If this one, the cap will continue to be 50,000. So if you hit the cap last round, you'll probably stay at the cap this round, so 50,000. But if you're a smaller business who maybe the last round you qualified for $3,000, then this round you'll probably get a more generous award, closer to $6,000.
Yeah. So just to be clear, this is a grant program. This is not a payback, right? This is not a loan.
That's correct. It is a grant program unless, okay, so federal monies, you cannot double dip with federal monies, meaning you cannot cover the same things with our grant as you would with PPP, EIDL, restaurant relief, or any other federal type of program. If you do that, you will be required to pay somebody back, whether it's GEDA, whether it's the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan monies, or your PPP or EIDL. So you really you have to be careful about what you're assigning to what aid program that you're going after.
Yeah. And are there any restrictions on how they can use the grant funding?
In its current design that we're looking to unveil, in its current design, a portion of the grant will be pledged to your landlords and any back rents. So if you have rental arrears this year, then that is something that you will need to address with a portion of your award. And then with the rest you can use for other qualified business expenses. And when I say qualified business expenses, again, it's really more of the double dipping. You don't want to cover the same things that you cover with PPP that you do with a small business pandemic grant, coming out of basically the same federal pot of money.
Info Zoom will continue in just a moment.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Yeah. What are you hearing from businesses out? What are their biggest challenges in this pandemic? I know one of the things that we've heard lately is a lack of employees. People are clamoring, businesses are clamoring for people to walk in the door and apply for work.
Yeah, it's that's not a bad problem to have. So you have the customers, right? You have the customers, you're ready to deliver the service, but you don't have the labor yet, right? And so we are hearing some reports of that. We're hearing some reports, and that's across. I mean, that's not just a Guam specific thing. We're hearing it across America, that employers are having a tough time hiring at the moment. There continues to be, one of the things that has recently come up is supplier shortages. And so what you have is a situation where factories in Asia are slow to produce or there's delayed production. And with delayed production, there's delayed shipping, so you're having this supply chain that's somewhat interrupted. So we're hearing a little bit of that as well. Of course, our commercial landlords were suffering last year when people were having difficulty paying rent. That was part of the reason why the governor launched the rent assistance grant, and that's a lot of the reason why we're pledging a portion of this grant to rent. When we were putting together the program, when we were putting together the grant program, we consulted the Guam Chamber of Commerce, the Women's Chamber, the Chinese Chamber, the Korean Chamber, GHRA, a number of other small businesses, just a number of stakeholders in the design of this program. And a lot of them said that they would be using the money for key employees to bring them back or to maintain key employees so that they could get through the hump. They didn't really cite anything specifically. We didn't get an overwhelming sense of we're going to use the money for merchandise, we're going to use the money for utilities and rent. Although I'm sure the rising cost of everything is fuel, power, water, etc. is certainly a challenge as well.
Yeah. Anecdotally, are you aware of which business? Because there is a kind of a separation between those businesses that have actually, done well. If that's a kind of well, anyways, those who have done well during the pandemic and those who have hurt considerably. So, have you had an opportunity to talk with those kinds of businesses?
Sure. Well, that is something that we were taking into consideration in our first grant program in the Small Business Pandemic 2020. We required a business interruption level of at least 25% during basically in the thick of the pandemic, right around March, April May or so. This year, we're requiring an annual interruption of 15%. So it's a smaller, it's still, we're still requiring a business in order to qualify for the aid. A business has to have done worse in 2020 than they did in 2019. I'm very interested to see if there are businesses who may have qualified last year, but no longer qualify this year because maybe they were the fortunate recipient of lots of customers coming in buying stuff with all the stimulus checks. And I also think, you know, the proof is in the pudding. I'm not the subject matter expert on the GRT levels. That's more of a DRT or BBMR DOA thing. I'm not the subject matter expert, but when I saw that our levels of collections under BPT and whatnot were not as dismal as originally projected, then that really showed that people didn't take their pandemic stimulus checks and stick it in the bank, or they didn't use it to they use these checks to infuse the economy, right? And so that's by and large a good thing for our small businesses, a lot of our small businesses.
Yeah, you touched on it, and maybe we should go back to that, the eligibility criteria. Could you go over that?
Yes, the eligibility criteria for our small business pandemic grant, a business needs to have business interruption in 2020, okay? A business interruption of at least 15%. And so this is going to be evidenced by your 2019 filings versus your 2020 filings. A business has to have a minimum of $10,000 in receipts over the course of a year. So it's not for your side hustle. You know, let's say you have a job full time at KUAM, but you do some sales of some vitamin supplements on the side. It's not for you. Okay, this is for full-time businesses. So you have to have a minimum of 10,000 in revenue, as evidenced again by your filings, your GRT filings. You have to fit under the small business standards of the Small Business Administration, the US SBA. And so for the most part, I would venture to say most of our local businesses fall under that umbrella. Very few businesses are not considered small business, even a lot of our hotels, to be honest. And the business has to be licensed to do business in Guam. Ineligible entities include landlords, nonprofit organizations, passive investment types of holdings and companies, and businesses in Guam that are part of a national chain. And so if you're operated, you know, out of corporate in California or wherever, then your local business is not eligible. Let me see, anyone else? I think that's about it. Oh, businesses that are closed down and no longer in operation. So if you're a business that has shut down and not reopened your doors, this is meant, if you read the guidance of the ARP, a lot of it talks about building back from economic hardship. So it's, you know, we're trying to build back. We're not necessarily trying to fix what occurred last year, but to help businesses grow stronger for this year and the years to come.
We'll be back with more Info Zoom. Don't go away.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Anecdotally, have you heard of a lot of businesses closing down? What have you heard out there?
You know, it's really hard to Nestor, I think since the very beginning of the pandemic, to me, that has been really hard to observe because there have been businesses, I think, that have already kind of had a faulty, there are faulty business models out there. And for whatever reason, they remained in business. I'll give you an example, travel agencies. Most people now book their travel online, right? And we had a number of travel agencies, and I believe the bread and butter clientele was government travel because government travel, you have the government procurement, so you have to get quotes and all of those sorts of things. And so when I heard that a couple travel agencies closed down, I was sort of like, is that really because of the pandemic, or was it because of a faulty business model or a business model that was a little bit, it was kind of hanging on already by a thread? And then now this was an opportune time to just say, okay, you know what, this bread and butter is no longer here or indefinitely coming back, or not yet certain about when they're going to come back, and so therefore we'll shut down. I think it was already kind of a contracting industry, and then COVID just kind of exacerbated that. I think that's the same. What you find in a lot of our local businesses is what I was so proud to see was local businesses who were very agile about changing it up. These restaurants that started doing the family platters, I mean, that really just, we were, the resiliency of our local business is just, I can't stress that enough. And, the amount of, in my mind, the amount of heartache and pain they must have gone through, but to have come through this, I mean, I think businesses that are still open should be really proud of themselves because they've really come through a lot.
Yeah, we've got a lot of very skilled business folks here who, when pressed up against the wall, found a way to make it work. Conversely, for those that have closed down, are there other businesses that have opened as a result of the pandemic, saw opportunities and filled those?
One of the things that we are seeing, so GEDA did a grant, we did an online, virtual conference last year, right around Thanksgiving. It was called Taking the Leap. And a lot of it was targeted towards individuals who may have been employed and were interested in taking the leap and launching a business. And it was really, really interesting to see the more engaging sessions. I really thought licensing, permitting, and taxes was going to be the dullest session in the whole 2 days. I thought everyone would want to know about digital marketing and stuff like that. But licensing and permitting was one of the most robust. I mean, there were so many questions about people wanting to get new businesses off the ground. And some of them had to do with, there's no better time than now that I'm unemployed or that I have some cushion with pandemic unemployment, right? And I'm going to try this out. If it doesn't work out, I'll go back and get another job. So we've certainly seen that, number one. The other thing is we did launch, GEDA launched a program called the State Trade and Export Program in partnership with the SBA, where businesses were training to export their products. And so these were businesses who were doing a lot of local sales. And then they said, we want to start being a little bit more aggressive about exporting, whether it's developing a greater online presence, making more connections with vendors off island, et cetera. And so we had six companies participate in our STEP program, and the program is providing some funding to launch their export plan. So we're seeing a little bit of that. Of course, we've seen the business models that have taken advantage of the social distancing, and the fact that people are staying at home more or staying in their offices more. So of course, all the delivery services and shopping services, things like that. So yeah,
talk a little bit more about STEP program. That was an interesting idea that you guys came up with.
Yeah, so we applied. So GEDA applied for this grant, I want to say in 2018-ish or so. And the idea at first, so the State Trade and Export Program by the US SBA, this is something they've done with many of the states across the mainland. And Guam received the grant. And the original objective was to actually work with local businesses to attend trade shows, like to attend like a food expo or something along those lines. Obviously, because of the pandemic, that was no longer possible. So we had to redesign our program. And we said, what are we going to do? What are we going to build it around? And so we had our first cohort go through a training over the last few months. I want to say it was like a three month training, but probably 6 sessions. And then they did an export plan saying, I'd like to build a website, or this is what I'd like to do over the course of this calendar, this timeline. And then based on that, this is my budget. And then based on how the company scored, they could be eligible for up to $20,000 worth of grant funding through this grant program. So we have our first group graduating in the next week or so. And then we're going to apply for renewed funding so that we can keep on doing this over and over so more businesses can. This was our pilot. With the pilot, you really learn a lot.
Yeah. That's what pilots are for, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so then we're going to try this again so that we can, even more businesses can qualify. And so what we did was we used our Taking the Leap, the virtual conference. The virtual conference was really that was the mouthpiece that we used for GEDA programs having to do with lending, the STEP, and as well as our other as well as partner organizations that deliver training to entrepreneurs. There's the GUMA program, right? The Guam Unique Merchandise and Art, those guys. There's the Guam Women's Chamber, the Chamber. And so all of these different organizations participated in our November event. And as a result, I think what we're seeing a lot of is entrepreneurship, at least interest in entrepreneurship, but just a little further along, taking ideas and turning them into reality. I'm seeing a little bit more of it. It's very encouraging. I mean, just even on social media, a lot of these businesses could be like renegades. I don't know if they're licensed or anything yet, but good for them. Try it out.
They got an idea and run with it, because it might be a good opportunity. In Full Zoom continues. Stick with us.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc. GU Self-Storage, conveniently located near the Harmon McDonald's. We offer affordable rates, online payments, and auto bill pay for your convenience. Plus gate access daily from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Call us today at 648-7867 for more information. In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about what GEDA is doing in the way of trying to attract foreign investment, because we do need that inflow of capital, to go along to, I guess, support us while we're still waiting for tourism to get back on its feet. Talk a little bit about that.
Most definitely. So I think that one thing that is clear is that even pre-pandemic, this administration and our governor recognized the need for the diversification of our economy. We have spent way too long depending on the pillars of tourism, federal spending, etc. And so her passion coming into office was really to work on agriculture and aquaculture. GEDA has applied for a lot of federal funding in that way. We've worked with project partners, the University of Guam, the Department of Agriculture, and local nonprofits to really, I think the priorities have been training up the local workforce, and then launching these industries both at the grassroots level and cottage industry level, strengthening that so that the organic growth, but then also attracting off-island investment, right? And then with the pandemic, I think what we found, the chamber identified some industries that had been kind of sleeping giants, so they had been they'd been introduced in the past, but never hadn't taken hold in the past because, we're resting on our laurels and tourism is just so fat and healthy. So why do we bother with all that, right? And so now we're more aggressively going after other industries, including the captive insurance, Guam-based trusts, and others. And then industry-wise, the number one creators, the top two creators of jobs and businesses across the U.S. are healthcare and technology. And so there are two dedicated committees within the governor's economic working group dedicated to industries like that. So within healthcare, you have pharmaceutical manufacturing. So we do have a company recently that expressed some interest in manufacturing PPEs here in Guam. We also have technology. There's a significant investment at the University of Guam with strengthening their technology expertise. And there's the infrastructure of all the cables running through our island. And so there's definitely a lot of potential with regard to those industries from what we're seeing. And the governor is very supportive of it. We have an economic working group made up of private sector and government representatives, areas like construction, all the ones I mentioned, in addition, construction, ship repair, safe haven, and a few others that I don't have off the top of my head. But we have private sector folks working alongside government sector folks with the objectives of first removing barriers and barriers to entry. And if those barriers to entry are the government, we're trying to work through those things. secondly, incentivizing. So GEDA has done a lot of work with our qualifying certificate program. So this is our tax incentive program for foreign investment. We're also working a lot with Department of Labor on all of their different tax credit programs. Yeah, so there's a number of, I think there's a number of different industries that have a lot of potential, but that we're working very actively towards building.
And real quickly, we've got this economic forum going on Thursday. You guys involved in that, and what should we look forward to?
Sure. I noticed when I was looking at the agenda, now I'm not going to make it on Thursday because I am about 9 months pregnant and I have an appointment.
Congratulations. We talked about that.
I have an appointment I can't get out of, but our deputy administrator, Joanne Camacho, will be there. And from when I looked at the preliminary agenda, it looks like there's going to be a lot of discussion on the tourism industry and the rebuilding of the tourism industry. That's kind of the bread and butter, and then the other industries around it. I know the governor is being asked to speak as well, so she'll be speaking probably on. I know there's probably going to be significant discussion about workforce development, and that to me is the key. We talked a little earlier offline about a cliff, a fiscal cliff in the coming months when pandemic unemployment may end, and then you have all these people that are potentially unemployed. And I think that's something that working our basically workforce development programs, whether they be in the form of apprentices, job training, people retooling, reskilling, but also at the same time rebuilding our tourism industry. Those are all things that can kind of temper that cliff and kind of smooth the way for everyone.
Okay, and let's just wrap up with give you one more opportunity to make your pitch for the Guam Small Business Pandemic Assistance Grant Program.
Yes, sure. Thank you. So we expect to, the governor is expected to sign an executive order to direct the funding towards the Small Business Pandemic Assistance Grant in the coming weeks. So we're asking small businesses to stay on top of visit our website, investguam.com, give us a call at 647-4332, or follow us on Instagram or Facebook, Guam Economic Development Authority, GEDA, right? And for more updates. Go ahead and go to our website now so you can at least see the basic guidance. You know what paperwork to start getting ready. We've got you can get just about everything ready except the application and that's when the EO, the executive order is signed. We'll get the application ready and you can sign and submit. So start getting ready now, and GEDA will be here to support you and answer all your questions in the meantime.
Thanks, Melanie, and congratulations on the blessing of your first child.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nestor.
Melanie Mendiola is the president and CEO of the Guam Economic Development Authority. I'm Nestor Licanto. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you again next week on In Full Zoom.
In Full Zoom is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.